I tend to think that there's a few different levels at which this change will happen. So the first is food systems need to become regionally autonomous, sort of permaculture, biodiverse, complex systems. And chances are this will cost more money, but produce a much, much higher quality product, right? When you go grow your own kale and, you know, work with chickens in your own yard, feeding them scraps from the kitchen, like it tastes better. And the reason it tastes better is because it's like a nutritionally complete food that your body recognizes as having all the vitamins that otherwise you would buy 50 supplements for. So one is solving the food system at the level of individual behavior and village level behavior in developed countries. There's a shift in consciousness towards ecological consciousness, that we are part of a sort of Gaian organism that is supporting, a wide variety of life and beings. There's also on the systemic level, there's So, okay, I'm going to take a step back because we get pretty far out at this point. So I want to quote my friend Charles Eisenstein, who has a great framework for how change happens. The first level of change is and how to affect change. So you give a man a fish and he eats for a day. We're all familiar with that. Charity. And the second is you teach a man how to fish. And, this level of empowerment. Okay, now he can go do it himself every day and provide for his family. The third level is systemic change. And this is most of what EarthShot deals with, is systemic change, which means starting asking the question, so why does this man have to work so hard to catch fish anyway? Why does he have to drive 30 miles and then use gasoline on his boat to an ocean that actually doesn't have, a tenth of the fish that did 50 years ago, or a hundredth of the fish that it did 100 years ago, actually? And so these really systemic issues that actually have dramatic implications for everyone. And the fourth level of change is about narrative. What is the story of what it means to be a human being on Earth in this time? What is a human being anyway? What is the sense of self that causes us to affect these massive systemic changes like ecological collapse in multiple areas? And that is a level that EarthShot works on internally. So the way our company works, the way we communicate with each other, the way the cultural stand that we take as a company trickles down into systemic and individual landowner action, for example. So we work on the systems as part of the business. We work on the narrative as part of the company culture.
Yeah, I think that I can see how the narrative is super important, because you and I, in our work and in our lives, we probably meet a lot of people who are sensitive not only to their own needs and the needs of their own community, but in communities around the world. And when they hear about overfishing in West Africa, for example, about boats sailing down from the EU to overfish in West Africa, sail back to the EU to sell that fish, then that's a lot of people are pretty pissed off about that in the EU. So they understand the narrative, and therefore they're thinking at this global scale. But I'd imagine that narrative is not globally distributed yet, and not everybody cares about the plight of, this region of the world or that region of the world as much as they do about their own.
And not everyone has the luxury and privilege of being able to take into consideration global systemic changes. And if someone's food security is threatened and they need to go feed their family, guess what? Working for a logging company, destroying their own forest is the best option available.
Yeah.
And so we need to be working at all these levels. It's not to prioritize the level of narrative and the shift in consciousness towards ecological Gaian consciousness. It's not just to say systemic shift is the only thing we need. It's actually working on all levels at the same time. It's just that charity and philanthropy are fairly well understood and well done. systemic shift is an area where ecological work needs to move into to reach sort of like VC planetary scale, very well funded, very large amounts of money moving into nature restoration. And the narrative shift has to happen by the sort of conversations we're having right now, where we can identify what we believe in by talking about it, and where people listening can also self-identify, like, yeah, that's what I feel too. Like, I feel that humans can be a key species in the ecological web of life, and we don't have to be a detriment to the ecosystem. That our function to create beauty and to interact with other species is an amazing function, and to move into becoming a multiplanetary species and other sort of future of humanity activities, like, that's a really exciting, optimistic, amazing future. So if you believe that, like, let's go work together to actually make that happen, and forming coalition and allyship through shared mission and intention.